Someone made a return at Extreme Rules. Someone has made an appearance at SmackDown. A couple people will let go. All this, and we will debate the 80s versus the 90s of professional wrestling. All here on the All Effin' Wrestling Show.
No!
Hit the music, intern.
Stupid.
That's the wrong one. Let's try another one.
Coming to you live from the FN Worldwide Media Studios, located in parts unknown. It's the All Effin' Wrestling Show with your host, Canada Drive and the JFB.
Good morning, good afternoon, tonight for dinner. How you doing? I am, of course, the amazing, diabolical, the innovator of offense. I am the JFB, James from Boston.
And I'm the only man with a bionic arm. I'm that gingered up, bubbly son of a gun. I'm gonna have big fun on the bayou tonight. I'm telling to try, damn it.
The bayou. Is there bayous in Canada? Just curious.
I don't know. I just remember that song, "Son of a Gun." Gonna have big fun on the bayou.
On the bayou. All right. We're joined, of course, by starting goaltender coming in at 6 foot tall with a perfect save percentage, Liam Wakeland. Say hello, Liam.
Hey, what's going on, guys? I mean, I'm literally everywhere this day. I'm on Wrestling with the Paranormal, the Magic of Wrestling, the All Effin' Wrestling Show, and no, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, but we got
other shows we don't know about it. But what?
And of course, we are joined by the resident expert, Mr. Isaacs. Mr. Isaacs, say hello to the people out there in TV land.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Glad to be here.
All right. So we got a lot to get through today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my favorite part, the news.
From the four corners of the globe, from our studios to your home, this is FNN. The FN News Network, starring Canada Drive and the JFB.
How was the coffee this morning?
I know. We got hot coffee.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, this is really good. We finally found an intern.
I don't know, like it was like drugs or something. It's good.
Like he used to work at Starbucks, and we pulled him off and said, "Hey, how would you like to work for us for no money whatsoever and make coffee?"
Okay,
I'll do it. So that's it.
So we got a fact. We got a fact of the day.
Yes,
on the news here, and I like to pull something from Canada because, you guys don't always get Canada news down there in the States. You don't always get Canada news down there in the UK. Okay, so here it is.
Okay.
Canadians eat more macaroni and cheese than anyone in the world.
Interesting.
We are the leading consumers of macaroni and cheese in the entire world.
Wow. I did not know that. Now that I know,
I didn't know that either.
I'm empowered. I feel empowered. I'm like, USA. Let's start eating mac and cheese. Damn it! So you had a special announcement.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I had an actual brain fart there for some reason.
What does the brain fart sound like?
So, I actually have some exciting news, as I mentioned there. As of December the 3rd, the Magic of Wrestling will be getting a co-host. And who is the
Ooh.
co-host, you might ask? This person at the side of me, Mr. Isaacs himself.
All right.
He's
Woo!
obviously,
I had a conversation with Mr. Isaacs earlier in the week, and I was saying maybe you'll have a spot on our channel one day, and I'm thinking way down the road. It's like a week later.
Like years.
Like about 3 or 4 days later.
He really fast tracked that conversation.
Well, thank
I
you.
mean-
guys. I really appreciate
I mean,
it.
he put the paperwork in, the necessary paperwork. We gave him the employee handbook. He signed off on anything. We did his drug test and his background check. Everything.
We
came
haven't
back
got that
dirty.
back yet, by the way.
Yeah, everything came back dirty. So we know what he's on. He's a hardcore opiate user, and he's been at least busted once or twice for assault and battery. So what better way what better person to bring in?
yeah, absolutely. But on a serious note, I mean, he's been an absolute pleasure. He's always there to help us. And so I'm actually honored and privileged that he's going to be part of the Magic of Wrestling.
Yeah. I'm
Thank you
excited.
very
I'm
much,
excited.
Miles.
So
I'm
let's get to the news. Guess who's back? It's not Slim Shady. It's Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt showed up at Extreme Rules, and what an entrance. They showed the logo as if they're getting ready to go off the air. The lights go out. Michael Cole says, are we still on the air? Are we still on the air? And then we see
that was the worst. It's like, I think you know we're on the air.
Are we still on the air? Can I just say whatever I want to say? I like wearing women's shoes. And then he just goes crazy. And then we see Bray Wyatt finally emerge. He came back again on SmackDown, gave an impassioned, an absolutely beautiful promo, which I think is going to set up for a really big long-term story.
Okay, so a lot of fans think that this was from the heart.
Yeah.
I don't think it was. I think this was part of his character.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm kind of the opposite. I think it was more a passionate one. I don't think it was the character.
Yeah.
Well, he quivered in his voice at the beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was a sign of this. He wanted to make it sound like he's nervous. He's a pro. He's been doing this for how long? He's not going to quiver in his voice.
Yeah, he's like, I'm so nervous. It's
I'm
like,
so nervous. I've only done this how many times?
Former Tough Enough winner Sarah Lee passed away at 30. There was a GoFundMe set up for to cover her funeral costs for her family, and Tony Khan surprisingly gave $10,000 on the GoFundMe, which is a class act. We make fun of Tony Khan a lot, or at least I do. But I mean, it was really good to see people from the wrestling world and her fans stepping up.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who gave to that, because that's so classy. And like, you could see the list of stars that were contributing to this, and a lot of them never met her or anything.
Yeah.
They just dug deep, and that's cool.
Yeah, that's excellent. Jimmy Smith no longer doing announce jobs at WWE.
We have a message for you, JFB.
I need to respect Tony Khan more often. Dally, let me tell you, when Tony Khan starts doing shit right, then he starts getting my respect. I just kid. I'm a huge fan of Tony Khan. Although I do like to make fun of the fact that he looks like he's constantly on cocaine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But, hey, you got 2 football teams and a wrestling promotion. How the hell are you going to work and do all that in 24 hours a day?
Well, obviously, you've never seen me after I've drank in 2 monsters. Like, you should see. I look like I'm on cocaine too.
Next week on the All Effing Wrestling Show, we're gonna get Canada Dry all hopped up on energy drinks and just let them go like a top.
Make sure it's pineapple. That shit's good.
Yeah, and then so we have a scramble with the announced team. Wade Barrett's on SmackDown. We have Booker T. Booker T is on NXT. I'm not a Booker T fan. That guy's a company whore, is what he is. That man shills for the WWE like there's no.
But don't you love Wade Barrett on SmackDown?
I do like Wade Barrett on SmackDown.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like the fact that when LA Knight decided to become LA Knight again instead of Max Dupree, and Wade Barrett goes, I thought I knew him. I thought I knew him from somewhere. Absolute gold. Absolute gold. That's what you get with Wade Barrett.
I think that's the best team in WWE right now.
Yeah, absolutely. No expectations for a quick Jeff Hardy return. He's still dealing with legal issues. AEW is still investigating at this point the backstage instigation / fight. And someone is actually making it more difficult by posing a legal issue. I'm not going to name names, but I have a feeling it's CM Punk. I'm just going to throw it out there. I think CM Punk is the one who's pushing that he wants to have legal recourse. Gable Stevenson, we covered in the news a while back. Stevenson was struggling. Apparently, he has a heart condition. He had a heart procedure done and is now back to training full time at the Performance Center. So let's hope that the old ticker is working, and we get to see him sooner than later because his brother is killing it. Was part of the Diamond Mine, turned on Diamond Mine. He was just killing it. I'm hoping to see the two brothers wrestling with each other as a tag team would be awesome. For those who get Vice TV, last night from 8 to 10, we got a Vince McMahon documentary by the Vice Squad. And you know full well, Dark Side of the Ring, Tales of the Territories, they do some amazing programming. I have not watched it, but I know
what I'm watching tonight. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
That's my night covered.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm
going to do.
We got
content for all 3 shows for next week.
Yeah, exactly. Oni Lorcan is back with WWE, this time as a full-time coach at the Performance Center. Nigel McGuinness was released from WWE. No reasons why he was released. I got to say this. He is a brilliant mind. I would love to see him turn up at AEW, not as an announcer. I would like to see him come to AEW or even Impact or NWA as a producer. I think he's got the chops to really lay down some amazing stuff for the right promotion. Legado del Fantasma appeared, minus Elektra Lopez. Their new manager is Zelina Vega, now with blonde hair. I'm digging the blonde hair. I like the blonde hair on Zelina.
So Lopez was supposed to be going there, and then someone nixed that, right?
Yeah. I have a feeling it's going to be I'm not sure if that's the case, but that's what I hear. Big Time Bex is actually close to returning to the roster after a shoulder separation. Let's end on some good news. John Moxley, or actually the Kingdom. Let's start with that. The Kingdom. Matt Taven, Mike Kanellis, and Marie Kanellis showed up on Rampage on Friday, challenging Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions FTR. The Kingdom is back in Ring of Honor, baby.
They've been rumored to WWE just like days before.
They were, yeah. And it's funny because I was on another podcast and we were talking about, the possibility of where they would go because they were free agents. And I said AEW would be a great landing spot. What makes it even better is out of those 3, Maria Kanellis is the diamond of that group. That woman has a mind for the business that makes Dusty Rhodes look like an idiot. That's how good she is.
Wow, that's a huge claim.
Yeah, she's got an incredible mind for the business. And I think, in all honesty, she's the one that's going. Her and Madison Rayne are going to be the ones that make AEW's women's division the best division around. Joseph Graham said, I hope that Adam Cole will rejoin them. Here's the thing. We do have news. Adam Cole suffered a major concussion. There's no timetable for his return. I can say this with 100% surety. You have to overlook getting 1 or 2 more matches left in your career and worry about your worry about your brain health.
Yeah.
If I knew then what I know now, I probably would not have played sports as long as I did and suffered the concussions I did, because that stuff, once that happens, you can't.
I really hope that Adam Cole just takes absolutely all the time he needs before he steps back in that ring. Yeah. And if he never steps back in the ring, I'm okay with that. But I think he'll be back. He'll be back, but take the time you need. Get better.
Absolutely.
I think his health's more important than anything.
Yep. Bingo. And last news, Jon Moxley signed a 5-year extension, and Renee Paquette joined him. She is all elite as well. We talked about it on Wednesday night, Dynamite After Dark. Moxley is in a position to be the locker room leader. Him, Jericho,
Brian Danielson.
Who?
Brian Danielson.
Yeah, Brian Danielson. I think those 3 guys are pinned to be leaders of the locker room.
We talked a little bit about this. Do you guys think, I'll let you guys answer, do you guys think that Renee Paquette is part of that 5-year deal?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you think she's part of Moxley's deal instead of her own deal?
Well, he's negotiating. He's like, well, if I'm going to sign this, you got to hire my wife. That's pretty much.
I can see that. Yeah.
You want me for 5 years? You got to take the old lady too, damn it.
But he's already made an impact backstage interviewing. You can see the quality raise up right away. And I think
absolutely.
It's huge.
It's like saying, would you rather have Marvez or Renee? Take your pick.
Oh, man.
I think that's an easy pick. All right, so that's our news. Let's get to our joke of the week, brought to you by the mysterious Enlightened One. Here we go. Joke of the week.
Welcome here to the effing joke of the week. What do you get when you cross a Cocker Spaniel, a poodle, and a ghost? You get evidence that you were looking into my research. Very funny. Is that a joke, or did I scare you shitless?
Oh, that was gold.
Did you guys hear the fart at the end?
Yeah, but what was the deal with the kids? I feel scared for the kids that they have to face the Enlightened One.
Well, I think that was the laughter back and forth between him and those kids is what really.
Yeah. This is really creepy.
Someone call an adult, please. I need an adult.
Now, Mr. Isaacs, you called out myself on AFW Backstage yesterday.
Correct.
And since I'm taking a bit of a hiatus from you, you're gonna have to deal with the Enlightened One.
Ooh,
he does not fuck around.
I'm not scared.
No, he does not. If I was you, I'd start getting some really good life insurance policies, just because you want to make sure your wife and your kids are well taken care of. And I would like to have that Miami Dolphin jersey when you do pass on to the other side. So I won't wear it, but I'll memorialize you.
Right, I'm sure.
All right, guys, that was Joke of the Week. If you have a Joke of the Week, you can send it to Canada Dry. You can send it to myself. You can send it to Liam. Send us your jokes, and we will post them, and we will play them, and then you will be internet famous other than slip and fall and whatever else is caught on a security camera. So, joke of the week.
Tell you what, if you don't have a joke of the week, but you have a funny cat video, we will also accept that.
Okay, we take funny cat videos. I got some funny cat videos I've seen that have made me chuckle over and over again. So yeah, send them on in. So let's get, of course, we went through the whole rigmarole, the dark matches, the mid card match. Let's get to the main event, if you will. this is the main event of the evening. All right, Joe Mama, man, we are.
You know, we're not even 2 years old, this podcast.
Yeah.
And we have some of the best music
Oh, yeah, we do.
in all of podcasting.
Yeah.
And tomorrow is 1 year old, The Magic of Wrestling.
Natural
Wow.
Wrestling is celebrating the 1 year, 1 year old. You know what you get? It's a piece of paper. 1 year anniversary is paper. So,
Is that it?
random fact I just thought I'd throw out there for the hell of it.
Here's your
Yeah.
piece of paper. Enjoy it.
Yeah, just piece of paper.
For the big
All right,
one.
so our main event, me and Canada Dry, we always talk about what we're going to do for the week, for the show, and we came up with, we not a top 10 list, but let's do a round table, if you will, and we're going to talk about two different eras. We're going to talk about the 80s, which was the golden age, the golden era that a lot of people refer to. And then the 90s, which was a vastly different product, all the same. So let's talk about the 80s. Let's talk about the 80s first. The 80s were a lawless wasteland of nothing but small territories, either controlled by AWA, the NWA, and then eventually WWF kind of seceded from them, kind of like the South from the North, and created their own promotion where they were mainly in the Northeast. Here's the deal. Think about this.
Let me ask you this question, Jeff.
Yeah.
So was WWF one of the bigger promotions as a territory?
They actually were not. In terms of area, yeah. In terms of crowds and this and that, absolutely not. You had more fervent wrestling in the South than you did up in the Northeast, and at one time WWE or WWF, which was at that time known as WWF, they were part of the NWA. They were part of that chain of territories that was run by the NWA. And then Vince Sr. decided he wanted to kind of go his own way. He would have a working relationship, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, they kind of just took off and started doing their own run. So
prior to Vince McMahon Jr. Kind of making it global,
yeah,
Vince Sr. was kind of breaking away as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He started with Capital Wrestling, and then eventually that became WWF, and then eventually Vince bought it and got rid of the W. And I didn't say last week Canada Dry looks like Kevin Owens.
How do I look like Kevin Owens? How is this even possible? Aaron Fight, is that what it is? They say kiss, keep fighting? Maybe
just keep fighting. That's it. But yeah, you had NWA in the early 80s were the most powerful promotion around, period. They had Georgia Southern, Mid-Atlantic, they had World Class Championship Wrestling, they had Georgia Championship Wrestling, Florida Championship Wrestling. They had a vast mass, but AWA was in the Midwest. Obviously, they were in Chicago, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio,
Minnesota,
Indiana, that area. So, here's a rundown really quick of some of the big names that were in these promotions. AWA, you had Nick Bockwinkel, you had Hulk Hogan, Gene Okerlund, Bobby Heenan. NWA had Flair, Harley Race, Jerry Lawler, Dusty Rhodes. They had the Von Erichs. And then eventually at some point, WWF got Hogan, got Macho, got McMahon, got Piper, Okerlund, and Heenan. So let's kind of open it up and let's talk about the territories, because what do you think is the defining moment that really kickstarted the boom in the 80s? And I'll go with Canada Dry first and see what your thoughts are. What moment did you realize we were in a wrestling boom in the 80s?
Well, I think you know, you had WrestleMania 1, but prior to that, I think Andy Kaufman with the Memphis wrestling territory really caught the eye of wrestling fans everywhere. It's like, whoa, this isn't just like this bullshit thing anymore. Like it's bringing in a Hollywood. Like Andy Kaufman was huge on Taxi.
Oh yeah, he was on the #1 show broadcast.
So when him and Lawler appeared on David Letterman, it didn't just make their thing bigger. It also made the David Letterman show a thing. Like it was struggling before that. Yeah. And after that, it set the David Letterman show on a rocket path, and it made David Letterman's career.
Oh yeah,
to help him start out.
Well, and it's funny because Letterman has come out and said that, you know, his show was on a lifeline. It was dying a death until he had those two on, and he said that made him who he became. Mr. Isaacs, when did you realize that the 80s boom, that wrestling was getting ready for a massive, massive headline?
Yeah, I mean, it was those early WrestleManias for me. That's kind of the kickoff point of the WWE taking a national approach.
Yeah,
which infuriated the NWA. Obviously,
yeah,
it ignited a huge war that lasted for many, many years beyond that. Yeah, but going back to what Canada Dry said, yeah, the Andy Kaufman thing was absolutely huge. That was kind of the first step of American pop culture intertwining with professional wrestling, and that was a huge, huge moment that eventually led to a lot more pop culture involvement with those early WrestleManias.
Yep.
And Vince Jr. finally got in and made it a national product. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it basically celebrity involvement, as much as we hate it as hardcore wrestling fans, that really is kind of what kicked off things here, making pro wrestling a big cultural phenomenon, at least in North America.
Yeah.
And I think Vince McMahon was salivating. His dad rejected Andy Kaufman, but I think when he saw what was going on, he's like, oh, they have something here. I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And when Vince broke off from the NWA, I know there's those stories about how, when he would go to meetings with the NWA to kind of break up with them, so to speak, he took Gorilla Monsoon with him to make sure none of them were going to attack him. That's a story that I love as well. Monsoon being like the big, tough bodyguard guy for Vince.
Yeah. I'd say, George Penny says, I'd say the boom started when they appealed to mainstream a bit more and doing more involvement everywhere. We'll get to that because that definitely is true. Liam, what is a pivotal moment for you in terms of the boom in the 80s?
So obviously I wasn't alive around this time, but obviously I do a lot of research and stuff like this. I kind of agree with Canada Dry and obviously Mr. Isaacs. I think the first WrestleMania there, I think that was a big thing because nobody knew what to expect. It's named WrestleMania. It's a big show. And that's, for me, WrestleMania, the first one.
I forget what it was, but they had some really bullshit names for WrestleMania before they called it WrestleMania.
Oh, yeah. They were horrid. They were absolutely horrid. I think for me personally, I think the Lawler aspect of it, I mean, that started in 82. So you're talking a whole 2-3 years before WrestleMania. The other one is David. I can't remember his name. When he smacked the hell out of that reporter,
Dr. David D. Schultz.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he smacked the hell out of a reporter for asking him if wrestling was fake, and he says, "You want to see if it's fake?" and just slapped the shit out of him.
It was John Stossel, the guy that works.
That's right. It was John Stossel. Yeah,
he smacked the shit out of him, and he just like fell to the ground and got up and cowered away real fast.
Yeah. And that to me was a pretty pivotal moment because
it cost David Schultz's career.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He never had the career after that. But Lawler, because I mean the whole Kaufman Lawler, if you really want to get deep into it, and we won't because of time constraints, but Vice has a new show called Tales of the Territories, and the first 2 episodes were about Memphis wrestling, and the second episode was primarily about Jerry the King Lawler and Andy Kaufman. And the one thing that stuck out for me on that episode was that Kaufman loved professional wrestling. It wasn't a way for him to get in, more notoriety or get people to know who he was. Really, honestly, he didn't cash one check.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The fact that none of those checks were given to him, he never cashed any of them. That's crazy.
Never cashed any of them. But I mean, even his parents had no idea that it was all fake, or not fake, but it was all predetermined. For years, they hated Jerry the King Lawler because they thought that he legitimately broke Andy's neck, So I mean, that's a huge, huge moment. And I think you won't have WrestleMania, and you wouldn't have the movement that we had in that big boom if it wasn't for Lawler and Kaufman.
What celebrities did we have at WrestleMania 1?
Liberace was there. Mr. T.
Joe Frazier?
Who?
Joe Frazier?
No, Joe Frazier wasn't there, but it was Billy Martin was there.
I thought there was a boxer that was like the special ring and
Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, Ali.
Ali was part of WrestleMania 1?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That's what I totally.
Yeah. The greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali.
Now, which one did Aretha Franklin sing America the Beautiful at?
Yeah, that is true. That is right.
The first one.
I mean, he's singing in a couple of them.
Yeah. Anytime you can have Billy Martin show up, there's some legitimacy. Because, I mean, between how many times he was hired and fired as the New York Yankees manager, him showing up was, but Liberace showed up too. I mean, Cyndi Lauper was there. And, I mean, you had a decent amount of really famous people showing up at WrestleMania.
And it's Mr. T in the main event?
What's that?
Wasn't Mr. T in the main event?
Mr. T was in the main event. Yeah, it was Mr. T and Hulk Hogan versus Piper.
And Mr. T at the time was one of the biggest stars in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, the A-Team. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about other pivotal moments as well. Let's talk about NWA. Let's talk about NWA and what was a pivotal moment for them as well when they started really garnering some amazing following. Liam, we'll go first. What are your thoughts? What do you think is a pinnacle moment for NWA?
There's so many to choose from. I mean, I cannot think of one off the top of my head. There's literally thousands, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
That's all I've got on that one, unfortunately.
Okay. Canada Dry, your turn.
Well, I think Briscoe and Flair.
Yeah.
At the time was a really big match.
Yeah.
And they really kind of set Flair on his path and, established Flair as one of the bigger stars.
Yeah.
I think NWA was kind of behind the 8 ball at this point.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Okay. Mr. Isaacs, resident expert, what are your thoughts?
Starrcade.
Yeah.
Starrcade was an amazing series that predated WrestleMania and kind of had the same concept of pulling all the territories together into a super show. Particularly Starrcade in 1983, which was the year that I was born, which is where Ric Flair took the NWA Championship famously from Harley Race in his first title reign. And of course, Flair obviously is a pop culture icon.
Yeah,
and it all started right there at that Starrcade where he took the title from Harley Race. To me, that's the biggest moment for the NWA.
So now I have a Darby Allin look, just so you know.
Man, they are grabbing at sticks here, man.
Throw yourself against the wall real quick.
I got the broken arm, so I'm not going to.
All right. So for me, Starrcade, obviously. I mean, Starrcade proved that you could have a model of having a spectacular once-in-a-year pay-per-view where you just bring every star possible and wrestle. And, but Flair taking that belt from Harley Race, that kicked off, I think, the golden era for NWA, kicked off the golden era for Ric Flair. I mean, Ric Flair was not who we knew going into the late 80s, early 90s, throughout the rest of his career. He was just Ric Flair. I mean, he was not really anybody that you would say, oh, that guy's
Ric Flair really became Ric Flair in the 80s.
Yeah. And that match with Harley Race. Yeah, that match with Harley Race made him a made man. I mean, it marked him down as being a made man.
Because like Harley Race at the time, he is one of the main champions in wrestling at this point, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, if it wasn't for the NWA seeing the possibility of, because you had new revenue streams, pay-per-view is not a thing. Even when WrestleMania, if you wanted to watch WrestleMania, you really had to go to a stadium or to a location to watch it, because there was no such thing as pay-per-view back then. It was I can't remember the term, not closed caption, but closed circuit. It was closed circuit. So Canada Dry say he broke his arm at the Nitro circuit and then doing a 1080 trike flip, doing spinny stuff in landed.
I did. This is how it went down.
Tope Suicida.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that I get hurt, I always say I was fighting ninjas. So, which seems to appease the masses. So, let's talk about AWA for a moment, because I think when you talk about the 80s, they get pushed to the wayside very quickly. But you had some great. I mean, you had Vern Gagne, who not only owned the AWA, he was one of their biggest champions. Rick Martel was a champion for AWA. Nick Bockwinkel was an AWA champion. But guys like Hogan,
with the Midnight Rockers, like Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels, AWA as well.
Yeah, they Scott Hall was a tag team champion with Kurt Hennig in AWA. I mean, they had some decent stuff, but what's a pivotal moment for AWA in the 80s?
I'll go ahead first.
Go for it.
Hulk Hogan appearing in Rocky 2.
Yeah. Rocky 3?
Rocky 3. Yeah.
Was it 3?
Yeah, it was 3.
Yeah.
See, this is before his WWE run.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is what brought him to the WWF.
And I remember the chase that Hulk Hogan had for that AWA World title.
Yeah.
And I remember watching one match, and Hulk Hogan won, but there was some sort of thing that the ref screwed up, and the title went back to Bockwinkel.
Yeah.
And the fans were like, boo. And Hogan was so over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in AWA, he was so over. He came out to the Eye of the Tiger music, which was so cool.
Yeah.
And I think Vince saw that. He's like, I've got to get this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Isaacs, what are your thoughts? What's a pivotal moment for AWA?
Yeah, it's got to be Hogan in the early 80s, because, I mean, the AWA kind of lived in the shadow of the NWA. Obviously, there was the kind of great schism there where the AWA kind of broke off away from the NWA, started their own independent league, and there was a lot of dispute over who was the real champion, because I think the NWA champion at the time had splintered and went to AWA. I may have those facts a little off, but that was my understanding of it. There was kind of a great schism between those two. AWA was always kind of a afterthought of the 80s, but I mean, there was some really good stuff there, and particularly the Hogan era, the early 80s.
So, you're the expert. Is this true? Was he going to be called Thunder Lips?
I don't think that's what he was going to be called as a wrestler. No, to my understanding, I haven't heard that. But then again, if
I haven't heard that, that's why I asked you.
If Hogan told the story, then who the hell knows? Because he's about.
Well, Hogan makes up lies and says he writes this down.
He's the most unreliable source. Hulk Hogan is the most unreliable source when it comes to facts about Hulk Hogan.
Well, I mean, he had the story about how he met Metallica and hung out with them, and they offered him the spot being the bass player. And then later, Lars Ulrich went on Howard Stern and said, I don't recall ever even meeting this guy before. I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, what does the Hulk Hogan think? Like that people are like some of the people from the band aren't gonna like say something like
Brother,
to discredit
they
him.
were
Like,
so fucking trash back in the 80s. They won't remember anything, brother. I'll just say this shit. Who the hell knows? They were alcoholic. Nobody will remember a damn thing, brother. No, but yeah, I got to go with Hogan in the early 80s. I think that was the pinnacle. AWA kind of slid after that. By the time they were doing the super shows in the late 80s when they brought Lawler in, it kind of flopped at that point. And, you know, that was kind of the end of the heyday of the AWA.
Yeah. Oh, Liam, wax poetic about the AWA, my friend.
So obviously, I'm in agreement with these two. I think the Hogan thing obviously was probably a big part of it, especially with the thing with Botwinkle. I feel like, I think Mr. Isaac said it best. I think, Hogan's big in the thingy, and after that, it kind of just went downhill.
Yeah. I mean, you know, for me, it was, you know, ESPN, them getting the ESPN deal was a huge deal because
that was big.
ESPN was nationwide. It wasn't like in select areas or select territories. ESPN, as long as you had cable, you had ESPN, and them being on constantly. And this is before ESPN had all the major sports covered. You know, they had niche products, and one of them was professional wrestling, and it was a ratings boom for them. The sad fact was Vern Gagne signed a shit deal where ESPN made millions of dollars off of AWA, and they barely saw any money. That, and then when they went out west and went into the Bay Area, at, you know, the San Francisco, the Northwest territories, I think really hurt them in the long run because they were writing checks that were bouncing left and right. So,
well, I really want to make sure that we cover everything. So I'm going to say we have no time limit on this show. Let's do it all proper, and let's just keep talking until we got everything.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to hour number 3 of the All Elevation Wrestling Show. We're on the marathon, hour 3.
Well, I don't even know, but Dirt Sheet Radio has a podcast, and they're just like 3 hours long.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculously long. Yeah, if you want a good, you know, you want to listen to something while you're falling asleep, Dirt Sheet Radio News. That's it right there. Nothing against them, but it's just so long and drawn out. So let's talk about other territories, but let's talk about promotions within the NWA. And one that sticks out the most for me is World Class Championship Wrestling. You want to talk about ratings?
So they were NWA, right?
They were part of the NWA, but they had ratings better than WWF, better than 90% of the NWA territories, better than AWA. They sold out the Sportatorium every day, every week, every month, every year. And it was run by the Iron Claw, no pun intended, of Fritz von Erich. I mean, they, you know, but that promotion in the NWA territory, if you want to talk about curses, there you go. That is your curse right there. All the Von Erichs except for one are dead, either by overdose or suicide. You know, Gino Hernandez passing away was a huge blow. You know, it was so freaking cursed. It put a cloud over World Class Championship Wrestling. But they were still pulling, you know, they were pulling in. But, you know, when all your
Were they based out of Atlanta still?
No, they were based out of Texas.
Yeah,
Dallas, Fort Worth. You know, if it's such a cloud over that promotion that it essentially kind of made it so people didn't want to wrestle there because they were afraid they were going to die. You know, Canada Dry, your thoughts on World Class Championship Wrestling?
Well, honestly, I didn't know much about them other than the Dark Side of the Ring with Hernandez and you know, it's the precursor to WCW, right?
Yeah.
I don't know much about them, so I'm just going to pass on to the expert.
Okay. Resident expert, Mr. Isaacs.
Well, obviously the Von Erich family. I mean, it was just absolutely huge. Kerry Von Erich, at his matches with Ric Flair
Oh,
at the Sportatorium. I mean, it was just absolutely electric.
Yeah.
I mean, they definitely left their mark. I don't think they had the best wrestling of the NWA.
Yeah.
But they definitely had the most fans and the most electrifying product as far as like fan interaction, fan attendance. They were definitely awesome. They were awesome. I mean, I didn't get them in this area, but I've gone back and watched some of the old WCCW stuff that was on the WWE Network and now Peacock. And man, those fans, just the women screaming for the Von Erichs, it's just wow. It was a spectacle, that's for sure. It was a very good promotion.
I mean, if you could sell out a baseball stadium without a card announced, which they did 4 times,
it's crazy.
That's huge. I mean, that shows you how fervent world class championship wrestling was in that Dallas Fort Worth area. Liam, what are your beautiful memories of WCCW?
The thing is, I don't actually remember much about these. I think the history's so hard to find. The early days, it's probably, I don't know much on them, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
The Freebirds, versus the Von Erichs, Joseph Graves.
Freebirds were amazing.
Huge.
And you can see them on the dark side of the ring as well. A lot about the Freebirds in WCCW.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about WWF because, in all honesty, the victor is who writes history. And WWF has rewritten history. And so let's talk about the early days before WrestleMania. What do you guys think was the linchpin to WWF's success? You know, once they've left the NWA, before they really get into WrestleMania. Liam, what do you think is the linchpin for, or that one time when you knew WWF was getting ready to explode?
I think acquiring Hulk Hogan, I think bringing him to the promotion overall. I mean, look at the moments through history. How many of them has got Hulk Hogan's name on them?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You get a bell for that. You get 2 bells for that, damn it. Canada Dry, your thoughts?
Okay, so Hulk Hogan coming to WWF was the big thing. But it's not just Hulk Hogan coming. It's the timing of his coming. Yeah. Because there's an action figure that is going crazy in North America at the time. Do you guys know what this action figure is?
Not a clue.
He-Man.
Yeah.
Essentially, Hulk Hogan is a live He-Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you
got all these kids with this blonde muscle action figure.
Yeah.
And then you see, wait, I think that's what they did. They captured a live action He-Man. Yeah. And he already had the pop and the push in AWA. So he'd already been in the Rocky movie. So it was already prepackaged lightning in a bottle for Vince to take him.
Yeah. Mr. Isaacs, what are your thoughts?
Hogan Andre, WrestleMania 3. That was the pinnacle. That was the turning point. That was the moment that everybody still talks about. People don't really talk about those first 2 WrestleManias that much.
Yeah.
They talk about Hogan Andre. In fact, a lot of people mistakenly say Hogan Andre was on the first one.
Yep. Absolutely.
He wasn't. But obviously Andre was a bit over the hill at this point. He had had a lot of injuries. If you go back and watch some of the early matches of Andre and Hogan, like from the early 80s in New Japan, they're technical clinics. Like you wouldn't even recognize the WrestleMania 3 match. But the WrestleMania 3 match is what people kind of gravitated towards in recognizing WWF as like a worldwide brand.
Yeah.
But Hulkamania was already running wild way before that, though.
It was, but the slamming of Andre, the aesthetic of him lifting up Andre and slamming him in the ring just completely changed the image.
Yeah.
And really propelled Hulkamania forward.
Yeah. I mean, for me, obviously Hulk Hogan coming within months of signing with the WWF, beats the Iron Sheik. But a really interesting fact that a lot of people overlook was, and shows you what kind of businessman not only Vince was, but what an asshole he was at the same time. He started touring as soon as Hogan won the WWF title. He started promoting and started running shows not in the Northeast. He started going to South, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky. There was a very big unwritten rule, which was other promotions could not run in other territories. And Vince McMahon kind of said, well, it's not set in stone. I never signed anything, so I'm going to do it. And that took over. I mean, that was a huge, huge thing because it forced the hand of the NWA and the AWA to start competing with WWE, because on top of not only just running shows in other territories, they were buying syndicated television out, time in those markets. And so you could turn on thinking you're going to watch world-class championship wrestling. You're going to watch the Von Erichs versus the Freebirds for the 50th time that week. And it turns out it's not. It's Hulk Hogan, the Iron Sheik, and Nikolai Volkov. And you're like, what the hell is going on? That was a huge deal because it made the NWA and it made the AWA step up and say, holy shit, we have to start putting together a better product. Or they're going to
after they got Hulk Hogan, the rape of all the territories began. You had Junkyard Dog coming to WWE. You had Hillbilly Jim. You had Greg the Hammer Valentine, Tito Santana. Like all these guys from all the great other territories were just pillaged from WWF.
It's like the domino effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and let's talk about Black Saturday, because that's a huge moment in professional wrestling when, instead of Georgia Championship Wrestling showing on TBS, Vince McMahon bought that time and started showing it. And that was a huge killer for the NWA, because even though Vince's ratings were horrible in comparison to Southern wrestling, which is what most people traditionally were watching, was NWA Southern wrestling, he eventually turned around and resold that time slot to Jim Crockett Promotions for $1 million, which is what helped him finance WrestleMania. I mean, if it wasn't for that shrewdness of saying, I'm going to force their hand, and then when they put their hand back out, I'm going to take a big fat shit in it and feed it to them.
Funny because at the time, mostly in the 80s, you didn't get paid for wrestling. You had to pay to get your show on the air.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
McMahon
selling it for $1 million. So how much of Mr. Isaacs, you're the resident expert. How huge was that Black Saturday and that shrewdness that Vince had to buy time and then resell it for more money than what it was worth?
Yeah, it caused a lot of backlash. Because the Southern fans did not like the WWE style of wrestling. We grew up on a more like realistic based, more violence based, more tough guy based aesthetic of professional wrestling, and our part of the country didn't take too well to that. So there was a lot of backlash against it, and I think it just kind of stoked and fermented more resentment towards the WWE.
Yeah,
that of course carried straight through the end of the territories.
Yeah,
they were neck and neck as enemies ever since then. And just to kind of go back to, I see George Penning in the chat mentioned Harley Race slamming Andre. There was quite a few people that slammed Andre before.
Oh yeah.
That wasn't the first one. That wasn't even the first
slammed
one.
Andre before that, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he slammed him at some WWF event at like a baseball field. He also slammed him a couple times in Japan as well. Kamala slammed him once as well. So no, I mean, it's not the first time anybody's ever slammed Andre. It's just the one that everybody knows because that was the most famous instance of it.
Yeah. They acted like Hulk Hogan and Andre had never met before.
Yeah.
When really
Yeah.
they had when Hogan was a heel.
Yeah, exactly. Liam, what are your thoughts on Black Saturday and the WWF going rogue?
I mean, this is the way I see it. I mean, WWE wants to be competition. Yeah, they're going to step on toes no matter what. But look at where they are now. Would they be where they were if they didn't take that risk? Because it were a risk. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it caused a lot of backlash, as Mr. Isaac said there. An interesting thing what George says there. Did it cause the first toxic wrestling fans? What do we think on that?
I agree. I mean, and Southern wrestling fans, even now, today, they didn't like the cartoony style of WWF. They wanted that realism and that reality-based programming. And they still, to this day, like ratings-wise, if you break them down by region, WWF still does not do very well in the South.
Were you saying that AEW has a lot of support down south?
I think they do, yeah. I mean, when it comes to ratings, it's hard to get a gauge on a region area, but I think AEW, because they're a little bit more realistic. But look at WCW. We'll get to them eventually too, but WCW decided to go away they decided to stick to their roots of Southern wrestling, and it paid off in spades. I mean, 83 weeks of dominating ratings in the 90s is proof positive that they knew what they were doing. So, I mean, we talked about, WrestleMania, but let's talk about the territory. Let's talk about Jim Crockett Promotions, because I think you can't talk about that transition from the 80s to the 90s without Jim Crockett. The NWA was failing. Jim Crockett came in, started buying territories left and right. Georgia Southern, Mid-Atlantic, Bill Hurd's promotion, Memphis Wrestling. He started buying everybody, thinking that he could leverage. And then when he tried to sell his pay-per-views, specifically Starrcade, he was told no, because Vince McMahon threatened to pull his product from TV stations.
I believe this was when Survivor Series was happening. He screwed over Starrcade.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Starrcade was on the same day as the inaugural Survivor Series, and McMahon after that told him, if you want our product, then guess what? You can't get Starrcade. You can't show Starrcade and show WrestleMania. It just doesn't work that way. So, Mr. Isaacs, what did you think?
That's unfortunate, but I mean, that's big business for you. But yeah, Jim Crockett Promotions kind of consolidated all those NWA territories, tried to make a run going national to go head to head with Vince. And, when you don't have the backing of financial partners, broadcast partners, it makes it a little difficult. I know they tried to counterpunch by putting Clash of Champions on, I believe, the same time as WrestleMania. And of course, that's not going to go anywhere.
I think they should have probably just skipped that. No, go ahead with this.
Yeah. I mean, I give them credit for at least attempting a counterpunch, but it just didn't go over very well. And there wasn't really much Crockett could do after that if he couldn't get firm footing on pay-per-view, and the cash flow just wasn't there. It just wasn't happening.
Liam, what are your thoughts?
I think Mr. Isaacs again said it pretty much well there. I think once you've not got the financial backing from obviously promotions and stuff like that, you're going to lose. But I do respect him for obviously trying to compete with WWF, but I mean, sadly they didn't succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we get from the 80s, we're going to that. Go ahead, Canada, your thoughts.
What am I afterthought now? What I think I noticed about the Jim Crockett Promotions is they were bleeding money. They were mismanaging money so bad. They're going on private jets and just burning money. Don't worry, we got lots.
Yeah, money will come in. I swear, promise.
But there's something I want to talk about is the story.
Yeah,
the stories in WWF in the 80s.
Yeah.
Were killer.
Yeah.
They did stories so well in the 80s. One that comes to mind is Roddy Piper versus Adrian Adonis.
Yep.
you had Jake the Snake versus Robert Roode, not Robert Roode,
Rick Rude.
Rick Rude.
Yeah.
Just like, oh my goodness, there's so many good storylines going on
Oh yeah.
in WWF in the 80s, and I think that's
Mega
something.
Powers. The breakup
Mega
of
Powers
Mega
is-
Powers was huge.
Yeah. Mega Powers was the big one.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
That's a year plus storytelling right there.
Yes.
So that was a huge thing. But eventually, those storylines and that cartoonish style ultimately led to WWF almost going bankrupt. Jim Crockett sold to Turner. Turner had now, Jim Crockett Promotions became WCW, which had more financial backing than what Vince had.
Yep.
And, what kicked off the whole war was WCW hiring Eric Bischoff to be their executive vice president of wrestling.
now Eric Bischoff tried out to be a backstage interviewer like Sean Mooney or whatever, and they weren't interested.
No.
He had to interview a broom.
Yeah. Yeah, you had to interview a broom.
That was his audition. He had to interview a broom.
Yeah. I saw the interview. I thought it was actually not that bad.
Bishop's a good talker. He is.
But now you have financial backing, and WWF starts taking a hard hit, and they start bleeding money left and right because nobody wants to see a guy dressed up as a repo man versus an accountant named IRS. They were too cartoony. They were too over.
Clown.
Yeah, and so when they started going to more grittier, with Stone Cold, The Undertaker, Bret Hart, all that stuff, Hogan left, Macho Man left, Heenan left, Okerlund left. The guys that were linchpins and they were the crux of success in the 80s were leaving to go to WCW in the 90s.
Well, here's the thing: is that Vince was kind of pushing a lot of guys out to pasture ahead of their time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Macho Man, Roddy Piper. He had them on commentary.
Yeah.
Instead of in the main event.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember this or not, but when on those WWF Superstars tapings, they would start every show, the crowd be chanting reinstate, reinstate at Randy Savage when he was sitting at the commentary table because they wanted to see him back in the ring, but Vince didn't want him to wrestle anymore.
Yeah. Oh, and Vince was, and that's the thing, like Randy Savage was not happy. He was pissed off that he had to be in the commentary. He knew he had more time. And so he left, goes to the WCW. And now we have a war. Now we have two huge promotions. You have WWF, WWE, WCW, and they start going after each other. And to me, the linchpin, I think what made WCW better at doing what they were doing, not only were they doing the grittier storylines and more going back to that Southern wrestling roots, it was the fact that they got luchadors and they got the cruiserweights and they got the athletes, that I think.
Prior to this, the only luchadors Vince had was the Conquistadors.
The Conquistadors.
He did bring in Great Sasuke once back in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Like
but Ultimate Dragon.
Their idea of a conquistador was Tito Santana.
That's ridiculous.
But it was huge. They had Japanese wrestlers, Ultimate Dragon, Muda, Liger was there. You had these great Mexican wrestlers, Psychosis, Seco Play, Rey Mysterio. They started showing athletic matches versus WWE, which was if you're under 6'4", 300 pounds, we don't have a use for you. We don't want you. And they, to me personally, I think they dropped the ball on that new generation before they got into the Attitude era when they had guys like WWF success. Joseph Graham says WWF success is Vince being a relentless bastard. He's not. You're not wrong, Joseph, at all.
No, well said.
But he's got that. You got to have a narcissistic personality to pull that shit off.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. My wife has talked about this several times with me that you'd find that most CEOs are narcissists.
They're terrible people.
Yeah, they're horrible people.
So
but
do you guys think that I should go full narcissist to get effing wrestling?
There you go. I think you need to break some kneecaps and slit some throats, my friend. I'm just saying.
Go for it.
Boing. But yeah, I mean,
like how I conveniently had that in my lap.
Yeah. But so the question I'll pose to you guys is, did WWF drop the ball in their transition between the golden era and the Attitude Era with guys like Bret Hart, with Shawn Michaels, with Razor, with Diesel, did they drop the ball and not utilize these guys correct? So Liam, go first.
I'm gonna have to say no, because I mean, yes, I mean, there's some youth movement in the ranks. Yeah, there was some like cheesy ones, but once they made that like transition to like the Attitude Era, I mean, rest is a piece of cake, to be honest.
Yeah. Mr. Isaacs, your thoughts?
Yeah, that period between the golden era and the Attitude Era was pretty brutal in parts.
Yeah.
I mean, it just was. The wrestling was just not very good. The characters were overly buffoonish, overly cartoony. I do think they dropped the ball on that. Absolutely. I think they had a chance to make a run at a more realistic product, especially with workers like Shawn and Bret.
Yeah.
But they did not start doing that until the late 90s, and they suffered for it, and it just about damn near put them out of business.
Yeah.
Like they almost went bankrupt and went completely under. So, yeah, definitely a missed opportunity. I see Joseph Graham mentioned ECW brought in the Luchadors. He's right about that. ECW brought in Rey Mysterio and Psychosis, which essentially put them on the radar for Bischoff then to scoop up. So, I mean, you could even kind of throw Paul Heyman in here, and that he had a stroke of genius by bringing this style of wrestling into the United States, which then Eric Bischoff put on a higher platform, and it was amazing. It really sparked a lot of energy on WCW programming. I loved watching the Cruiserweights. They would usually open the show, and it was fantastic. And it really gave WCW a youthful vibe to it.
Yeah.
Dig it. Yeah.
That was right on. That was a nail right on the head. Canada Dry, your thoughts? Did they drop the ball with Bret and Shawn?
Well, I think WWE dropped the ball with the money, because they were having really big troubles at the time. They had Hulk Hogan and the muscles and the steroid scandal.
Yeah,
and Bret Hart was so big internationally. Like he was bigger in Germany and all these other places. Like the crowds would mob him. And I don't think they quite understood that.
Yeah.
So I think Shawn Michaels and Bret, they were the very, very, very bright spots of that WWE Next Generation, which is a horrible name for that era. I do remember that old lady commercial for Bret Hart, where like, I was mugged, but I put the sharpshooter on him and waited for help to arrive.
Oh God, that is hilarious. I followed it. I can't get up. I mean, let's talk about ECW really quick, because I think they played a pivotal role, because outside of ratings and the millions of people that were watching the Attitude Era WWF programming, the WCW Nitro programming, there has never been a more diehard group of fans than ECW fans. The only promotion I'd say got even that may have beaten them was World Class Championship Wrestling in Dallas. But those Philly fans, and I mean, still to this day, you'll run into an ECW original fan, and they still talk about it with as much reverence as we're talking about WWF and WCW and AWA and the NWA. They talk they talk with great reverence. So I mean, how important to you was ECW as a third brand essentially? Liam, go ahead.
The one thing I like about ECW is they wasn't afraid to push the boundaries. I mean, it's they don't call it extreme for nothing, and that's one thing I've always respected ECW for.
Yeah, absolutely. Canada Dry. I know you love ECW as much as I do.
I think it really create. Well, it's not that I don't like ECW.
Yeah.
It's that I didn't really follow it as much as like you are hardcore for ECW. I was an occasional watcher of ECW, so
Yeah.
I don't know as much. But what they did was they did something different.
Yeah.
When everyone else is giving out apples, they were giving out oranges.
Yeah.
And that's like, what? I can get this with my wrestling?
Yeah.
This is cool. Like
Yeah.
they're producing something that's not being offered.
Yeah.
I think this is something that was only happening in like Japan and stuff at the time.
Yeah.
With these hardcore matches. And it was a flavor that the wrestling fans didn't know they wanted until they saw it.
Yeah.
And this really amps up WWE and WCW to putting up more riskier content. And it really is the prelude to the NWO and the Attitude Era.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Resident expert, your thoughts?
Absolutely agree. I love ECW. I'm a huge fan of the original ECW. I used to stay up till 4:00 in the morning and watch it on this shitty Florida sports channel called the Sunshine Network.
Yeah,
I remember the Sunshine Network. They do lightning hockey games.
Yeah. I would stay up till 4:00 in the morning. They would show ECW on like between Saturday and Sunday at like 4 in the morning, and I would stay up to watch it. I was a huge fanatical ECW fan, and I think that ECW really kind of set the groundwork for the more risque television programming in pro wrestling. They kind of got away from the traditional elements of wrestling when Shane Douglas came out during the Eastern Championship Wrestling era and threw down the NWA title, which obviously the NWA was kind of a dead institution at that point, and said, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to go a different direction. And Paul Heyman took it a different direction. He started bringing in the younger guys. He took that Onita influence from Japan and brought it over and put a little bit of a Americanized spin on deathmatch, kind of toned it down a little bit, made it hardcore.
Yeah.
So we had hardcore wrestling, which you started to see in WWE and WCW a couple of years after that.
Yeah.
Heyman doesn't get enough credit, man. Like he really sowed the roots of the Attitude Era and the NWO and all that. I think all that risque booking came from him doing it first.
Yeah.
But you know what, Jeremy? I think he also went too far with the hardcore. Because there was some shit that went down that was way too hardcore.
Yeah.
Well,
are you talking about mass transit?
Mass transit, and our friend that passed away, what's his name? New Jack. So, like some of the shit that went down, throwing the guy
New
off.
Jack was wild, man, and the mass transit incident, that was horrible. I mean, that was a huge setback for ECW, but yeah, they did push the envelope a little too far.
Like
but
we're to the opinion that the most important thing that talent wise of a wrestler is keeping the other guy safe.
Yeah,
I don't think that was a priority in ECW.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, it wasn't all hardcore. There was plenty of technical wrestling in ECW too. Dean Malenko, Benoit, those guys, when they were in ECW, they didn't do hardcore matches. They did straight up technical wrestling, and it was really good.
Yeah. I challenge anybody to watch the series between Malenko and Guerrero and not say that ECW had it going on, because
fantastic.
Those matches blow out anything that they were blowing out people that WWF and WCW could not even do, and putting on those clinics were just
100%.
amazing. So, we get to the 90s. Obviously, we go to a much more reality-based, a lot more adult content, PG-13 or whatever the rating was at the time. Who was more influential in creating that 90s feel and that 90s boom? Was it New World Order or was it DX? And Liam, we'll go with you first.
Wow, what a question to start with for the 90s. I'm going to have to say it's the NWO because, I mean, they were a big part of the WCW thing. I mean, the only issue is they grew so much where it got to a point where I was just sick of seeing it. You had like your NWO B team, you had the Wolfpack when it just became too much. So, yeah. NWO for me.
Okay. Canada Dry, your thoughts?
Well, it really started with the NWO. So DX is the answer to the NWO. So I feel like the NWO was really the precursor to that part of the 90s that really took wrestling in a whole other direction and put it back on the map.
Yeah. Mr. Isaacs?
Definitely the NWO. I mean, I think DX is more entertaining, but the NWO was the precursor, and I don't think DX would have came along if the NWO hadn't happened first.
Yeah. I'm going to go with DX. And here's the reason why. The NWO was awesome when it was 5 guys. DX stayed
great burgers, by the way.
Yeah. 5 Guy Burgers, baby. But DX stayed consistent. Yeah, they stayed consistent. I mean, yeah, it was born between just Triple H and Shawn Michaels, but when when Michaels left and and Trips took over DX and reformed it into what we now consider to be the full advantage of DX. I mean, they just slayed it. I mean, they were doing stuff that was a lot more crude, and they were doing stuff that was a lot more humorous, but they were pushing storylines after storylines, and you had other stories that were going on. So it wasn't centered around DX. It's just that, DX versus the Hart Foundation was a huge. Who did the NWO have? They had Sting and DDP, and that was it. And NWO monopolized probably about 90% of WCW programming.
Well, yeah, you had the DX versus the Nation of Domination as well. Nation.
Yeah. I mean, you had decent, they had but at the same time, with the Nation of Domination, you also had the DOA, the Disciples of Anarchy. You had the Corporate Ministry. I mean, you had other factions. So DX wasn't central, and they weren't the acme, if you will, of factions in WWF. Everybody had a faction in WWF, and they all fought each other. And it was, Los Boricuas. I mean, you had some really great ones, but NWO that's all you saw week in and week out, and it got tiring. And I think Liam said it best. It was boring after a while that you have 65 members of NWO. You have you had NWO Japan, you had NW, and eventually, the Latin, you had the Latino World Order, which was, to be fair, that was the only way they were going to get on TV and get any TV time was to form that faction. So, yeah, I'm going DX. I think DX has played a much more important role in the development of WWE. So, I'm trying to think of anything else. I mean, we talked about the Monday Night Wars last week, a couple weeks ago. So we don't want to dive too much into that, but
Right.
You had Ring of Honor that came out in the 90s as well, that I think filled a gap.
But I think what I really want to talk about now, is what was more impactful, the 80s or the 90s.
That's a good question. I'm going to pose
the
it
80s
first.
versus 90s. Let's get into if one, you obviously can't have one without the other, but what was more impactful?
Liam, go first.
I'm going to say it's the 80s because the way I looked at wrestling is the 80s paved the way for the 90s, the 90s paved the way for the 2000s, and so on and so on. So I'm going to have to say the 80s.
Okay. Mr. Isaacs?
Yeah, I pondered this question quite a bit when I knew this was going to be the topic of the program. I'm going to have to say the 80s. And I would have said the 90s if we're just talking about 97, 98, 99.
Yeah.
Because they're not that great. The 80s really kind of set the stage for wrestling as a nationalized product in North America. And I think that's the very important difference here between the 80s and the 90s. I'm going to have to go with the 80s.
Yeah. Joseph Graham says the 90s was more impactful. Canada Dry, your thoughts on?
I want to know what Joseph, if you could take a little bit of time, type this up and tell us why the 90s is more impactful. Because we're all saying the 80s. Because I'm saying the 80s.
Yeah.
Because, I grew up in the 80s and wrestling, that's where I fell in love with wrestling. Watching Superstars every Friday night, staying up late. I'm trying to stay awake. You wake up, it's the end of the show. You're like, no.
You wake up, it's the American flag, or it's the Canadian flag with the Canadian national anthem.
Yeah, like the screen is blanking. I'm like, no. But yeah, that 80s is what made me fall in love with wrestling.
Yeah.
The 90s made me fall in love with wrestling in a different way.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah.
But I think the 80s for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the 80s as well, only because 80s is what jump started my love affair with professional wrestling, and it was the rock and roll era, and it was getting introduced. I knew WWF because my friend had satellite dish, and so we watched Saturday Night Main Event. We watched Superstars, but he also with having this gigantic satellite dish in his backyard, I got exposed to Georgia Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett and the AWA and the NWA World Class Championship Wrestling. I got to watch all that. I even got to see Calgary Stampede, which was a member of the NWA, and get to see Calgary Stampede.
Something we didn't talk about in this is the fact that if not for WCW, and the NWO and what they were doing there in that 83 weeks, they really pushed WWE to survive.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't do that, I don't know if we even have WWE today.
Nope. They almost financially bankrupted the hell out of them. Mm-hmm. And, Vince losing Bret Hart, Vince losing Diesel, losing Razor Ramon, not being able to pay them. But, the godsend of that too was Taker took less money to stay and to help right the ship. And that makes a huge deal. Triple H could easily have gone. You can't exclude 97 and 99. Wrestling was booming then. And also NWO spawned the Bullet Club, which arguably dominates the wrestling business. I mean, Joseph, you have a legit argument. I will say that. For me, the 80s. But yeah, I mean, when you talk about the 90s, like, Undertaker staying was a huge thing. Triple H staying. Triple H could have, because of what happened with the whole King of the Ring not being picked to win it, which would have elevated his career. He could have sucked his thumb and went to WCW and joined his friends, and he didn't. He stayed, and that says.
And it's hard for me to pick the 80s too, because Bret Hart is from the 90s, and he did all his best work in the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I gotta say the 80s, because the 80s is what bore me to be a fan, and like you said, Canada Dry, I enjoyed the 90s for a much different reason. As an adult, it was cool to fantasize about Stone Cold stunning your boss and telling him to shove it while you flip him off the middle finger. I mean, who didn't live that fantasy in their head? And some, I'm sure, decided to carry that out as well. So,
okay, that looked just like it did on television.
So let's kind of wrap this up with this.
Okay.
Everyone's going to go around and tell us your favorite match from the 80s.
Okay.
And your favorite match from the 90s. One each.
Okay. Well, I'm going to save you for last, Canada Dry, since you came up with it. I'm going to go first. My favorite match from the 80s was the Greg Valentine, Roddy Piper strap match what dog collar match was just freaking amazing. The 90s, man, I'd have to say the Montreal Screwjob was one of my favorite from the 90s. I think it was it ruined kayfabe for me first and foremost. Kayfabe was kind of ruined a lot sooner than that, but that match changed the course of history. And I think that's what gave WWE the edge. So those are my two. Liam, you go next.
So for the 80s, I'm going to have to say the Royal Rumble. I think that's probably a good little thing there because nobody didn't know what to expect. The 90s, Mankind versus The Undertaker, Hell in a Cell. And the reason I say that one is because it's the very first pay-per-view I actually watched as a fan.
All right. Sweet. Mr. Isaacs, you're next.
From the 80s, I'm going to go with Steamboat Flair from an event called Chi-Town Rumble in the NWA. Yeah. That was awesome. My uncle had that on VHS tape, and I used to take it from his house and take it home and watch it and then bring it back. And I probably did that 10 times.
Yeah.
That was a great match. I love that match. I thought it was better than Steamboat's match with Savage, which most people seem to point out when they talk about Steamboat in the 80s.
Yeah.
Then for the 90s, oh man, it's hard for me to pick, but I would probably have to pick one of the Jerry Lynn versus RVD matches from ECW, and you can take a pick because they had like a trilogy and they were all three masterpieces. So I'm gonna have to go with that.
In the dry, you were last. Lay it on, brother.
I know you're the expert, but you're wrong. Steamboat Savage was the best match in the 80s.
No.
Because WWE didn't have very many matches like that, and it stands out so huge because they just didn't do that very often.
It was the best WWE match of the 80s. Yeah, by far.
And therefore, like, because it's more well known and well seen, that it's just bigger. And it's WrestleMania.
Yeah.
It was a great match, no doubt about it.
For the 90s, I'm going Owen Hart versus Brett, starting off WrestleMania.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Just seeing those two, like, they just rocked the house every single time that they got in the ring together. It was just it was just special to watch.
Yeah. All right, guys, that is our show. Holy Christopher Columbus, or Happy Indigenous People Day. Holy cow. we went long, but it was well worth it. I think you look at now and see where wrestling is now, and it's a pale in comparison to where it was in the 80s and the 90s.
Absolutely.
And, guys like Jericho, guys like Adam Cole, they all owe a debt of gratitude to Jim Crockett, to Vern Gagne, to Vince McMahon, guys who rolled the dice and risked it.
Thank you so much, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate it too. But those guys rolled the dice to take a big risk, and the risk paid off in 20-fold for sure. So you can go to our website, fnwrestling.com, scroll all the way down. No, a little bit lower. There we go. Right there. There's our links. If you want to join the AFW Prediction League, if you want to hang out in our chat room, if you want to connect with us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, you don't stop. That's where you go. Or you can go to youtube.com/FN Wrestling, and right there we have all our connections on social media as well. If you like our shirts, like this one, except for the Miami Dolphins jersey, you can get those at ProWrestlingTees.com/FN Wrestling. If you dig Adrian Adonis as much as me, Canada Dry, Liam, and the resident expert do, you can go to ProWrestlingTees.com/Adrian Adonis, because we literally run his shop. We got some amazing, cool tees on there for Adrian Adonis. We had an awesome show. It was amazing. On behalf of the resident expert, Mr. Isaacs, and on Liam Wakeland, Canada Dry, I am the JFB and Canada Dry.
I did talk to Hulk Hogan
Oh,
this week.
I did not realize you talked to Hulk Hogan.
And he said, you guys got to mention, if you guys ever want me on the show, you got to mention me at least 20 times this week.
And how many
And I
times did we
think,
mention?
I think we pulled it off.
I think we got. We'll have to go on the official count.
I think we did. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
Hulk
we'll get
Hogan,
the
Hulk
intro to
Hogan,
do
Hulk
it.
Hogan, Hulk Hogan. So that's enough. We got
Okay.
it.
Now we got X's.
So that's Hulk Hogan 23, effing wrestling 677. Canada Dry out. And remember, just keep fighting.
Woo!
Woo.
This has been an effing worldwide media production. You can find us on all social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and others. Head over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/effing wrestling. And while you're there, click like and subscribe. Want some swag? Head to our store at prowrestlingtees.com/effing wrestling. You can find all these links and much more at our awesome website, effingwrestling.com. As the JFB always says, you can book it.